Good morning, my friends. Here we have come together once again to worship. Here we have gathered in this sanctuary of the Spirit, a sanctuary made not of glass windows and wooden floors, but of woven hearts. Once more, the hour has come for us to claim a time for ourselves, for rest, inspiration, and renewal, to take our Sabbath together. And so come, my friends. Come into the sacred space that dwells among us no matter how far apart each of us may be. Come into this community of comfort, challenge, and celebration. Let's take this time to tend our souls and awaken our spirits to the life unfolding all around us. Yes, even in the middle of hardship and crisis. So come, my friends, come, and with hearts and minds open, let's worship together.
The flaming chalice is the symbol of the Unitarian Universalist tradition, the liberal religious tradition to which this congregation belongs. Will you join me in reciting the words on the screen? If you have a chalice at home, I invite you to light it with me at this time. As we kindle this flame, we recommit ourselves to the mission of this congregation, to build a Unitarian Universalist community that transforms lives and empowers people to serve the world. May the light of this flame be welcoming to all who seek a liberal religious home.
Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you. Will you reach out to me? With all our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony. Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you. Will you reach out to me? With all our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony.
Good morning. My name is Tris Chagnon, and I serve as the Family Ministry Director at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Raleigh, and I am thrilled to be with you this morning to tell you a story for all ages. Now, as you know, last Wednesday was Earth Day, and Earth Day is a day when we take time to appreciate and marvel at the wonderful world we are blessed to live in. In fact, the night before Earth Day, or early in the morning on Earth Day, there was an incredible meteor shower in the sky. And because there was a new moon, those shooting stars were bright. And I actually got up for a few hours in the middle of the night just to appreciate that with my son. We set up chairs in the backyard. And in the morning, my son and I both spent some time in our garden, preparing our garden for spring planting and summer. Now in the summer, my garden gets really big, and you may or may not know that I just really love and find peace in gardening at home. So my early morning chore in the summer is to fill 2 buckets with water from the spigot and to carry them up the hill and to use that water to quench the thirst of my very thirsty plants in the garden. And today's story is based on a wisdom tale, and it's about a young girl who has the very same chore. So of course I love it. And this story is called The Little Cracked Pot. This version is written by Sean Patterson and illustrated by Christina Patterson. These words are powerful, so listen well. Long ago, in a small village nestled among mist-covered mountains and bright green rice paddies, there lived a young girl. Mei Li was her name, and she spent most of her days playing with her dog Fufu. Every morning before she was allowed to play, she had to do her chores. Early each morning, Mei Li took the mountain path and made the long trip down to the stream. With her, she carried 2 water pots on either side of a pole. One pot was perfect. He was always full to the top with water when he arrived back at the village. The other little pot had a crack. He always leaked water all the way down the mountain path. By the time Mei Li arrived back home, the little cracked pot was barely half full. This routine carried on day after day. Mei Li would make the long trip home and end up with only 1.5 pots of water. Now the shiny and perfect pot was very proud of his accomplishments. But the poor little cracked pot felt ashamed. He was sad that he could only do half the job the other pot could do. The little cracked pot worried that he was a failure. He spoke to Mei Li by the stream one morning as they were getting ready for another day's long journey. He told her he was embarrassed that he could never do the job right. He asked Mei Li why she kept him when he was such an imperfect pot. Mei Li looked down at her special little friend. With a wink and a glowing smile, she asked him, "Did you ever notice that the flowers grow only on your side of the path? I have always known that you had a crack, so I plant flowers on your side of the path. Every day while we walk back from the stream, you water them for me." Mei Li explained that for many years she had been picking those beautiful flowers to decorate her table and to give to her friends and family. "Without you being just the way you are, we would not have such beautiful flowers to fill all of our homes." The little cracked pot was thrilled. He understood that no 2 pots are ever the same, or ought to be. He realized that each of us is unique, with the cracks and flaws we have, making our lives interesting. This story reminds us that sometimes our greatest gifts are born out of our vulnerability and our flaws. As we reflect in the service today about springtime, change, needing rest, imperfection, how we can find promise in those things, I encourage you to think about this broken pot. We have had so many challenges this spring, but it is still a time of hope and renewal. My hope for you is that you will be called to plant seeds in the soil and in yourself, that you will tend to the garden in your yard or your family or your very own heart. Take care of yourself. Give yourself grace. Take care of each other. Give each other grace. Now is a time when we can seek to find the value hidden in the challenges we face. I wish for all of you blessings this week, and I send you so much love, exactly how you are.
Whether you are watching from your smartphone, your laptop, or your smart TV, whether you are in Raleigh or halfway around the world, we're glad you're here. In fact, I'd like to give a very special welcome to all of you who have discovered us online. In recent weeks, we've had folks from all over the country joining us for our Sunday morning worship services, and we're so glad that you can be part of our lives for at least a while. Here at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Raleigh, we are intentionally inclusive, liberally religious, and actively serving the common good of Wake County and our larger world. That means whoever you are and wherever you are on your own religious journey, you are welcome here. That also means, as Unitarian Universalists, we seek wisdom and inspiration from many sources, but affirm our own individual experience and conscience as the best authorities for our beliefs. That also means that we are committed to making our world more compassionate and just, and hope you might join in one of our many efforts to do so. After the service, please join us for social hour in one of our Zoom rooms. There are instructions on how to access the Zoom room we'll be using for social hour on our website at www.uufr.org. If you haven't visited us before in person and would like to be added to our weekly email, so you can find out about everything we are doing online, even when we're not meeting in person, please visit www.uufr.org/visitor form. I'd like to encourage everybody to check out a new box on the front page of our website called Stay Up to Date and Connected, which has links to the latest newsletters, blogs, Facebook posts, and our YouTube channel. While we can't meet and greet one another in person this morning, I'd like to invite people to say hello using the chat function on your screen. This is the time in our service when we acknowledge some of the joys and sorrows of our community. If you have an individual joy or sorrow to share, I invite you to post it now in the chat box on your screen. As we reflect on the joys, the sorrows, the fears, and the hopes we all hold in our hearts, let's be together now for a time of stillness and silence, opening ourselves to that within us, between us, and amidst us, called by many names, but known to every human heart. Let's be together now in stillness and silence.
sight, and I am thine. I rest in thee. Great Spirit, come and rest in me. The ends of earth are in thy hand, the seas dark, deep, and far off land, and I am thine. I rest in thee. Great Spirit, come and rest in me.
Everything we do at UUFR, both for one another and for members of our larger community, depends on our continued generosity. We're doing everything we can to make being generous as convenient as possible. You can give by text, with an app on your phone, by making a donation online, or by mailing a check to the UUFR office. Instructions for how to do all of these things can be found on our website at uufr.org/donation. It's time now for this morning's offering. Please be generous.
Our first reading today is an excerpt from an article in Wired magazine titled "This is Not the Apocalypse You Were Looking For" by Lori Penny. Ever since I was a twitchy, morbid child, I've kept a private tally of the things I thought I might miss most when the world ended, so that I could be sure to enjoy them as much as possible. Hot showers, pottering around the shops, bananas. I didn't anticipate being a survivor in any country where bananas grow. In fact, I didn't anticipate being a survivor at all. I'm a puny, sensitive creature, and my best hope was that my tall and intimidating sister would sling me over one shoulder while blowing up the baddies one-handed. I just assumed we'd be together, not stuck on different continents. Funny how things turn out. COVID-19 changed everything. Suddenly, the immense and frightening upheaval, the cataclysm that means nothing can go back to normal, is here. And it's so different from what we imagined. I was expecting Half-Life. I was expecting World War Z. I've been dressing like I'm in the Matrix since 2003. I was not expecting to be facing this sort of thing in snuggly socks and a dressing gown, thousands of miles from home, trying not to panic and craving a proper cup of tea. This apocalypse is less Danny Boyle and more Douglas Adams. There's an important difference between apocalypse and catastrophe. A catastrophe is total devastation, with nothing left and nothing learned. Apocalypse, especially in the biblical sense, means a time of crisis and change, of hidden truths revealed, a time quite literally of revelation. When we talked about the end of every certainty, we were not expecting any revelation. We were not expecting it to be so silly, so sweet, and so sad. Our second reading this morning is called "Some Things Will Never Change" by Thomas Wolfe. Some things will never change. Some things will always be the same. The voice of forest water in the night, a woman's laughter in the dark, the clean, hard rattle of naked gravel, the cricketing stitch of midday in hot meadows, the delicate web of children's voices in bright air. These things will never change. The glitter of sunlight on roughened water, the glory of the stars, the innocence of morning, the smell of the sea and harbors, these things will always be the same. The feathery blur and smoky buddings of young boughs, and something there that comes and goes and never can be captured, the thorn of spring, the sharp and tongueless cry. These things will never change. The leaf, the blade, the flower, the wind that cries and sleeps and wakes, the trees, whose stiff arms clash and tremble in the dark, and the dust of lovers long since buried in the earth. All things belonging to the earth will never change. All things proceeding from the earth to seasons, all things that lapse and change and come again upon the earth, these things come up from the earth that never changes. They go back into the earth that lasts forever. Only the earth endures, but it endures forever. The tarantula, the adder, and the asp will also never change. Pain and death will always be the same. But under the pavements, trembling like a pulse, under the buildings, trembling like a cry, under the waste of time, under the hoof of the beast above the broken bones of cities, there will be something growing like a flower, something bursting from the earth again, forever deathless, faithful, coming into life again like April.
I am light, I am light. I am light, I am light. Ooh. I am light, I am light. Ooh, I am not the things my family did. I am not the voices in my head. I am not the pieces of the brokenness inside. I am light. I am light. Ooh, I am light. I am light. I am light, I am light. Ooh, I am light, I am light. I am light, I am light. I am divinity divine. I am the God on the inside. I am a star, piece of it all. I am light. I am light. Ooh, I am light. I am light. I am light, I am light. Ooh, yeah. I am light, I am light. I am light, I am light.
This spring, y'all, so far it has been one wild roller coaster, and not in a good way. Case surges, cloth masks, Zoom bombings, stimulus checks, PPE shortages, mandatory closures, lockdown protests, refrigerated trucks. You know, when I planned several months ago to preach about springtime and the kinds of changes the season might bring, this was not what I was thinking. Like many of you, I was thinking that spring might mean, spring allergies, warmer temperatures, more flowers, spring cleaning. I was not anticipating having to ask myself, is it spring allergies or COVID-19, or whether warmer temperatures might halt the spread of disease, or whether the park is open to go enjoy the flowers at a safe 6-foot distance from other people, or whether I'm cleaning enough to help flatten the curve. With all these disorienting changes, this is far from a normal spring. This is not a normal season in our lives. It is like the science fiction novel Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. In the book, a fifth season is a time of profound disruption, collective danger, and great need. In our world, the crisis we face is, of course, a pandemic. In the science fiction world of Jemisin's novel, however, a fifth season is an ecological crisis, an incredibly dangerous period of rapid environmental destabilization that puts everyone's lives at risk all around the world. But the ways that people and communities respond in the book may feel somewhat familiar. Picture: cold spells are rapidly spreading across the land, although too many people ignore them, unconcerned. Behind the stone walls of the local community or calm, the headman meets with Geomes, Loris, and other scientific leaders in her calm to determine whether the spreading cold, still mild, is bad enough to be classified as a fifth season. They argue, consult stone lore, and make a decision. The headman declares seasonal law, a series of changes within the calm that push citizens to take difficult but necessary action to protect themselves and their community. Folks rush to check that their calm's cache and their own individual house caches are fully stocked with food and supplies. A season can last months or even years, and they know that they may need to hunker down for a while. Some supplies become harder to find during a fifth season. Some vendors are no longer open for business, and others are restricting who may purchase certain supplies. Business as usual shuts down. Roles change. Suddenly, a craftswoman might find herself serving as a strongback, a person who's responsible for maintaining security within the calm during a fifth season. Or an engineer might find himself serving as a resistant, a person who is responsible for helping care for the ill. The notion of essential work within a calm transforms almost overnight. Does it sound familiar? We live in the real world and not a science fiction novel, however much this might feel like a work of dystopian fiction or an apocalypse, like in our reading earlier. But it is not a normal change of seasons that we face by any means. And yet, even so, the springtime does still have a thing or two to teach us about how to cope with a strange new season in our collective lives. The first lesson of the spring is about change. Spring is a time when the land is changing, is sprouting and budding and birthing new life. Spring teaches us that change is inevitable, but that we can also find balance and reasons for trust, even amid all the changes. We can find things upon which we can depend, like Reverend James talked about in his sermon last week about faith, and also in our reading earlier about the eternal, unchanging earth. As the earth reawakens again and again and again after the chill of winter, spring reminds us that our lives, like the planet, pass through seasons. Each of these seasons may seem different from the others, and as we settle into each one, it may feel like we will be there forever. I know that many of the things that this spring has brought to us feel collectively like this is the longest springtime of our lives, and yet we're only a month into it. But though the earth forever turning is itself eternal, as we heard in our reading earlier, each and every season upon the earth and within our lives will eventually pass, but in its own time. Even the things that we now face will eventually pass, but again, in their own time. No matter how much we protest in the streets for a premature return to normalcy. We are still early in this strange, scary fifth season in our collective lives, a season of changes, many of them so difficult, painful, frightening. But one day this pandemic will end. We do not yet know when that will be or what our lives will look like on the other side of this. But we do know that this too shall eventually pass. And we hope and pray that when it does pass, and when it is safe for us to do so, that all of us will emerge into the next season together with no one missing. The world we emerge into may look different, hopefully in some good ways, as summer's vibrant blossoming looks different than spring's tender budding. If this is an apocalypse, like the reading earlier suggested, may the new world being revealed in this painful time prove in the end to be more compassionate, sustainable, and just than the old one. It is my prayer that we as a global community will be able to keep some of the positive changes we see emerging, like green shoots from the damp soil in this time. Positive changes like more opportunities to work from home, measures to protect low-income families, and reductions in pollution. But I also expect that when all this is over, other things will go back to normal for us. Children will return to school. We'll gather for those postponed weddings at last, and we will celebrate them joyfully. We'll be able to safely hug one another again or share meals outside of our homes. I look forward to those days and to sharing them with you when the time is right. But for now, this season in our lives is still upon us. So we need to figure out how we can keep on weathering this time of crisis and change, because it is dangerous to end our strange season too quickly. And I know that's really hard. We've already had to cope with a lot. I know that these sweeping changes have left some of us wondering how we will pay our bills, feed our kids, keep working without getting sick or spreading disease, or take care of loved ones who are at high risk. I know some of us are already struggling with job loss, unpaid bills, and more. Some of you have loved ones who are sick with this. Some of you may know people who have died from this terrible disease. And I know many of us are afraid for our own health, especially those of us who are older or have struggles with their health already. And I know those of us who are healthcare workers are also scared and doing everything possible to respond to this at great personal risk. In such times, it is important to take extra care of ourselves and one another. This is a good time to ask ourselves what we need right now. Even if the situation we face right now does not have an impact on our personal health or finances, I guarantee that it will have an impact on our hearts and our minds and our spirits. So what do you need? What help do you need to get through this? And do not tell me that you need nothing or that you need no help. George Odell reminds us all our lives we are in need, and others are in need of us. I have to imagine that most of the congregation is going to spend at least some of the next few months helping others and needing help ourselves. In fact, in some ways, we're already there. This is a crisis. It is normal to be in need during a crisis, and it is good to ask for help. Human beings are strong and resourceful, but friends, we are also vulnerable. Which brings me to the second lesson that the spring teaches us, a lesson about vulnerability. Spring is a time of tender shoots, delicate budding flowers, baby birds, and beautiful but vulnerable things. Does that vulnerability make them weak? Spring is a time to recognize the fragility in our lives and be attentive to it. Vulnerability is part of the season in which we find ourselves. Let us be willing to acknowledge our vulnerability in this season and respond to others' vulnerability. We are vulnerable, beloveds. Vulnerable to illness and death, vulnerable to loss, vulnerable to racism, vulnerable to financial hardship, vulnerable to the challenges that we may already face due to an eating disorder or an addiction that's just being aggravated in this time, vulnerable to anxiety and depression, vulnerable to fear, anger, despair, and loneliness. I've been thinking about my own vulnerability in this time. This isn't a fun process. In fact, today's sermon is every bit as much for me today as it is for you. I'm not so much preaching to the choir as I'm preaching to myself as well, because this is the message that I too need to hear. Like many people, I don't like admitting when I'm vulnerable or when I may need help. For example, as some of you know, I slipped trying on rollerblades and broke my shoulder a couple of weeks ago. My partner Smokey offered to help me take off of those skates when I was sitting there on the floor. I graciously declined and did it myself, one-handed. It was fine, I didn't need help. He asked me if I needed to go to the doctor. I said, nope, I didn't need medical assistance. I'd just sit on the floor and ignore the problem until it went away. Then Smokey decided to change his approach because he knew who he was dealing with here. Instead of asking if I needed to go to the doctor, he asked me when I wanted to go. And I finally said, no was good. But I didn't need him to open or close the car door for me. Darn it, I was fine. So this message is for me as much as it is for you. Now is not the time to pretend that we are not vulnerable and that everything is just fine. Things are not fine. This is a crisis. We need to be real about the risks that we face right now. We do not need to be reactive, but we do need to be aware of our vulnerability and we need to be responsive to it. Which brings me to our third lesson of this season. I encourage you to tend to yourselves and your communities like spring gardens. Gardens are not sprawling vast wildernesses. There is an order and an intentionality to them, not just to protect the plants there, but to help them thrive in a confined space. Think of social distancing as the garden gates of your life right now. How is your life within those new limitations organized to attend to your needs right now and encourage well-being and growth? And I need to be clear that I'm not inviting you to organize your life right now for maximum productivity, at least not under the normal sense. This is a crisis, and the most productive use of your time right now is to devote your time and your energy and resources to getting through this and helping your loved ones to do the same. That might involve less time exercising, less time worrying about dieting, less time being a productive worker, or less time working on creative projects or household chores or whatever else it is that society has been telling you that you need to devote your time to. Make sure that your garden includes a lot of loving self-care. One of my colleagues recently reminded a group of clergy that in times of crisis, if the ways that you take care of yourself do not feel a bit indulgent, they are not adequate. Y'all, now is the time to acknowledge your needs and ramp up your self-care. And if you need help, ask for it. Let others know what you need, please. Don't be like me with the busted shoulder. Ask for help. Anyone who has ever gardened knows that the well-being of one plant in the garden is tied to the well-being of all of the others. Our roots are intertwined, beloveds. Now is not the time to try to pull ourselves up by our rugged individualist bootstraps. So reach out. Reach out to one another. Reach out to Reverend James and I. Reach out to our care team. Let's help one another through this hard time. Now is the time to renew our commitments to this community, to one another. We are reminded at this time of the deep truth of our seventh principle, that we are part of an interdependent web of all existence. We need one another, especially in times like this. So I invite you to think about what you need and also how you can support one another. Do not just think of your life right now as a spring garden, but also think of this whole community as one, as a community garden of mutual care and intertwined roots. Speaking of gardening and tending plants together, so 4 months ago, we gathered in the sanctuary together. This was back when we were able to still gather, and we passed around amaryllis bulbs. We held them in our hands and we imagined them as our wishes for the new year, for ourselves, for this community, and for the world. And then we potted them and we set them in the windowsills to grow. We didn't know what was coming then. We didn't know that in a few short weeks after that, we would be having to close our doors and begin meeting online. Now, I've been watering the bulbs every Sunday. It did not occur to me to ask for help tending them. I figured I could do it all by myself, as you can imagine, and so I just kept taking care of those 4 little bulbs on my own until they sprouted and they grew. Well, imagine my surprise when one day a few weeks ago, I discovered that our 4 bulbs were in fact 5 bulbs. Hidden on the windowsill behind the name tag racks was a bulb that I had forgotten even existed. For 9 weeks, I had not watered it or done anything at all to care for it. I didn't even know it was there. But do you know what? That bulb was alive. It was showing signs of green growth, and the soil was damp. Someone here in this congregation had seen it back when the congregation's doors were still open, and they had taken care of it. I did not ask for help. This tends to be my MO. But help was given. And so now, here it is, alive and well. And perhaps soon it will flower. Friends, you don't have to do it all alone. Ask for help. Accept help. Offer help. This is how we'll get through this together. I would like to conclude today with your own words. That's right. Last month, I asked you a few questions on social media, and you shared your answers with one another, and I promised to weave your responses into a poem. I borrowed the idea from the folks at the Live Oak UU Church in Cedar Park, Texas. And here's our poem, based on what you shared with me about your needs at this time. I'm fine. I'm fine. Perfectly normal, to be honest. Peaceful, even. A strange mix of anxiety and peace. Anxiety and optimism. How will living in the constant sense of dread manifest? Will this hard time make people stronger and more connected? Waiting at my pharmacy for a prescription, giving my office a deep cleaning, reading and stitching and baking, knitting, walking, and trying to keep my life as close to my normal as possible. I need fresh air, sunshine to work out, to adjust to whatever the new normal will be, and for things to stop getting worse. Working from home from the kitchen table office, working on the garden, working on some house projects, and working for a company providing essential services, I need a nap, a week-long nap, and new pajamas. Enjoying alone time as a brand new married couple, talking with distant friends by phone and email. Enjoying a small group of friends and family, I need connection, togetherness, to be reassured, to stay in touch with friends and family, to sit with mom, to use my writing to connect with others, to connect. So my friends, may we connect with one another even while we're apart. May we reach out to one another to help and for help. Let us turn to one another for support in this tough time. And let each of our needs be met as we face this new season in our lives together. Amen. Blessed be. May it be so.
I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open.
It is time now for us to extinguish this flame and return once more to our daily lives, strange though they might be in this time. As we do so, I leave you with these words by the Unitarian Universalist minister Wayne Arneson. Take courage, friends. The way is often hard. The path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Take courage, for deep down there is another truth. You are not alone. Amen, and blessed be.